What you call that noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com.
What do you call that noise?
What do you call that noise?
I'll tell you one thing about the young generation. They keep on getting younger. Back in October 2020, we handed over What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast, to a bunch of fans in their 20s. Margaret Brown, Miles Parsons, Hugh Thomas, Rachel Willey and Laura Wade talked about what it was about XTC that appealed to people who were barely born when they split up. And very insightful they were too. Well, time has passed and we're ready to hear from an even newer generation of fans who, as you're about to hear, are as wise and articulate as the last generation. I met several of them at the 2022 fan convention in Swindon and I was so impressed. My name is Mark Fisher and I'm delighted to sit back and listen to Ashley LeCron, Lexie Ward, Lee Saunders and Lewis Wilkinson as they share their enthusiasm not only for XTC but also the bands that led them to discover XTC. And because it's that time of year, they're in party spirit. All that is coming up. First, a brief and sad dedication to Chris Hobbs, who recently died. Chris was a big fan of the band and attended fan conventions in Manchester and Swindon and will be very much missed. All the best wishes to his friends and family. And then a massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon who keep the XTC podcast on the road. It would be fantastic if you would lend your support as well. And if you'd like to join them, just go to patreon.com/Mark Fisher and decide whether you'd like to be a pink thing, a humble daisy, or a knight in shining karma. If it's the latter, I'll read out your name at the end of each episode. If you haven't brought your copy of What Do You Call That Noise, an XTC Discovery book, just pop along to xtclimelight.com. That's all from me. Let's hand over to Ashley LeCron for this month's episode of What Do You Call That Noise?
What do you call that noise?
All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Young Fan Takeover Christmas edition. Today, there are 4 of us, including myself, and since the holidays are coming up, we wanted to go with a bit of a Christmas theme while also talking a bit about ourselves and what got us into XTC as people who weren't around to see them perform live. I'm Ashley, I'm 24, and from California originally, but I just moved to Oxford to get my master's, so I'm living over here for the time being.
I'm Lexie, I'm 22, and I'm from Duluth, Minnesota, USA, and I love XTC, that's why I'm here.
I'm Lee, I'm 25, I'm from Trowbridge in Wiltshire, so I'm not far from Swindon, and I love XTC and music a lot.
Hi, I'm Lewis, and I'm currently living in London, and no surprise, I really love XTC as well, and I hope everyone's feeling very festive today.
Very festive.
Yeah, it's super interesting about XTC because I feel like for as underrated as they really are still alive in a lot of ways and kind of live on through being this basis of inspiration for a lot of past and current artists as well. And I think through that, they've also garnered some younger fans. I know on the previous Young Takeover episode, it was mentioned that XTC fans tend to be people who are really passionate and knowledgeable about music. But Lee, you actually had a really interesting story as well about how you got into them that I think is a little bit unconventional to the normal gateway of getting into their music. If you wanted to share that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I had I had something of a false start with XTC years before I sort of got into them properly. Because when I was little, I really loved music. Even when I was little, I've always been a big, it's been my thing. But the way I got into XTC was through a much more niche passion, which is hill figures. So, I mean, living in Trowbridge, in Wiltshire, there's a lot of white horses around, and my local one is Westbury White Horse. And the fact that I used to love going to Westbury White Horse got me interested in hill figures when I was like 7 or 8 in the mid 2000s. And we did a trip around all the ones in Wiltshire. There's 8 of them. And then on a separate day, we went to the Uffington Horse, which of course is just outside Wiltshire in Oxfordshire. And they were just I just loved hill figures. It was just one of my things. And the way that XTC came into the equation is my dad bought me a book of 10,000 album covers. And of course, English Settlement was in it. And he knew the album cover already because he pointed it out, although I don't think he actually had the album. I guess it's just sort of a well-known album cover around here. But what we did was we scanned the album cover from the book and blew it up over, I think, 3 pieces of A4, and we cut the horse out of the paper and stuck what was left on the garden wall and spray painted inside it, so that, voila, you took the template back off and we had Uffington White Horse on our wall. And still there now, 17 years later, although it's the tail and the hind legs have faded a bit. But we went for XTC sketch rather than there's a famous one by William Plenderleaf. But yeah, and I also knew the symbol because it's on the back of Nirvana's In Utero. But yeah, that was the way that I discovered XTC. It was quite a long time again until I sort of discovered them properly. But because I felt like I should have known them when I was little, because I knew a lot, through my dad's taste, my mum's taste, and I had a lot of compilations. But XTC were on many of them. But I knew Nigel. I had Sergeant Rock on Now 1981. I had Senses on Now 1982. I had like a lot of, I kind of got them to a little bit. But then my false start was actually the Hilfigers, through Loving Hilfigers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. Lexie and I actually went out to see the Uffington White Horse. I live fairly close to it now. So it was a lot of fun. We went out 2 times, I think. Then the second time we tried to have a picnic, but it started raining in the middle of it, which is I feel like
It was a miserable picnic.
I don't know. It was fun in its own right, I think, for sure. But
Yeah, it was definitely a good memory.
I was fortunate enough to see it on the convention trip, and that was luckily a beautiful, albeit very windy day. Getting to visit Swindon and like hear the music and see it all in person, like added like a whole layer of magic and mythos to their whole discography to me. Like listening to tracks like Red Brick Dream and everything, like walking around Swindon, even though this is a very different Swindon to one they were in, that experience was really special.
Yeah, I found it the same.
yeah, for me, I just moved over here around the time of the convention, so it was a great way to kind of take it all in, I think. And I'd never been to the UK beforehand, so it was very surreal, I think, to be in the place that you hear about, in all the songs. Was really cool.
Honestly, I can't imagine like a better introduction to the UK, one like Swindon being your first like town, and just the XTC celebration weekend.
I know, yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people are always like, I think a lot of people kind of discount Swindon, and they're like, oh, it's Swindon, and it's not like London or Manchester or any of these places. But honestly, I really enjoyed myself. I actually quite like Swindon. So
Yeah,
Me too.
Yeah, maybe I was biased because I like their music, but it wasn't the like grey, dull image of that I imagined in my head. It had like these wonderful parks, and maybe it was brought to life by the events. I don't know, like people who live there seem to live there. The council don't seem to share the same love for it as we saw how things went with that, but it was miraculous they managed to like pull it off, because that was one of the best weekends, like getting to meet all of you, and like, because I was worried I'd go and I knew there were young XTC fans, but I wasn't sure who was going. But like I came out with friends and everything, and that was incredible.
I loved the experience. And I didn't really know Swindon either, even though I live locally. I always have. I live in a town as well that has a bit of a reputation for being a bit whatever. So I sort of thought Swindon's going to be fine, and it was fine. And the convention was the most I've ever explored it, and yeah, one of the best things I've ever done. And so yeah, definitely.
I found it to be an incredibly authentic experience to just land in London and then immediately go to Swindon. I don't know. I feel like walking around, like Ashley said, it really illuminated just the lore of all of XTC history. But it was also, it felt very real. I almost could understand the emotions and feelings that they were feeling when they wrote the songs. And yeah, it was a really good time. I don't see what's so bad about Swindon personally. Ashley and I were saying people that hate on Swindon should go see certain parts of LA, and they'll feel grateful about the city they live in.
yeah.
Maybe that's where the next XTC convention will be.
Yeah.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, let's hope we don't hold it in like Van Nuys or something like that.
I think we should keep it in the UK.
Yeah, kind of jumping back to how we kind of got into XTC or gateway into XTC. I think, for me at least, a lot of people kind of start out with just listening to new wave bands and getting into that through other bands. And I think that I did kind of have a little bit of a similar experience. I started listening to, actually, I guess really my gateway into the new wave or just acts associated was with Danny Elfman. He's pretty prevalent right now in pop culture just with all the movie scores like Nightmare Before Christmas and Beetlejuice. And so I kind of just became a really big fan of his, and it led me into Oingo Boingo, which kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. I got into some other associated bands like Talking Heads, Devo, and Thomas Dolby is definitely one that I really love. So I think that I was bound to find XTC one way or another through that. And it was eventual. I started out, I think, as most people tend to do, with Drums and Wires, which is, I feel like, a good entry point for people who are interested in associated bands and kind of that genre of music. But I didn't really end up getting super into them until I listened to Big Express. So
Yay.
Yeah,
Big
it's
Express
funny.
love.
Big Express love.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people kind of skip over that album. So when I hear other people seem to really like it, it makes me feel good because I was like, that album is, I mean, it's so amazing, and it's really cool that like the concept of it being with the railway and all that, and it's, I think too, another thing that's interesting about that album is the juxtaposition of a lot of the songs. Like if you kind of compare I Bought Myself a Lyrebird to a song like Train Running Low on Soul Coal, they're two entirely different songs, but they just go so well together on that album. And I think, my personal favorite on that album is I Remember the Sun. And also I love This World Over. There's like super powerhouse songs on that album. I think I Remember the Sun was actually one of the first songs that really got me into XTC. I think Colin is an amazing songwriter, and I was really drawn to that song in particular because I think I'm a little bit of a sentimental person, so it kind of spoke to me. And This World Over was another one that really drew me to them as a band. It has a killer bass line too.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
I play the bass myself, so that one was a lot of fun to play. I actually think that there are a lot of really great XTC bass lines for anyone out there who plays the bass.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's kind of what drew me in, and then I just went down this rabbit hole of listening to all of their albums, and yeah, now it's hard. I can't pick a favorite, and I can't pick a favorite song, and they're just all amazing in my head. I'm like, I don't even have a favorite. Like,
It's definitely been said before, but like the favorite XTC song / album just deviates depending on the day of the week, right?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I feel I have a fixed favourite there. I think I have a fixed favourite album.
Big Express?
That's my second favourite. My first favourite was the first one I heard, and I know it's an odd one to start with, but Apple Venus. Because by the time I got into them properly, I felt like I should have known them for years, like properly, because I like a lot of bands that, so Blur or Madness or whoever, bands that kind of get mentioned sometimes at the same time. I kind of knew their whole discographies already. So by the time I sort of discovered XTC properly, not realizing how important to me they'd become, I was a bit of a geek. I like to fish out kind of the other albums, and I kind of read about Apple Venus, and I'm going to start with that one. And it's still my favorite now. I adore it. But Big Express is my second favorite.
You might be the only person that got into XTC through Apple Venus. That's like a very rare pipeline.
Yeah.
It's a bit like I started with like Robin Hitchcock. Well, it wasn't the first one. The second one I heard was Respect, and I haven't got that far with him yet, even now. But I like kind of going for the other ones that have nice artwork, that maybe don't get as much attention. Well, at least I don't see them get as much attention before I sort of just delve into discographies properly. But yeah,
At least gives your perspective of a band, makes it into a unique journey, I suppose, that way. Like
yeah,
mine was Black Sea. I don't know how common that is, but because you mentioned the Blur connection, and that was definitely like my lineage was working backwards from them. So if we trace my whole love for indie music back, it would go XTC, back to Blur, back to Gorillaz, and I would have got into Gorillaz because I was like the appeal of it was like the cartoon band. I was not a diehard music fan like you. I was a cartoon fan, and that was like. I was like, am I going to get into like a band? Like that's like my dad likes music. I genuinely was in that kind of headspace for ages where I kind of rejected like being a music fan because I was trying to like be counter my parents. And then actually when I worked back to XTC, I realized like, wow, my dad has good taste because my dad my dad like loaded loads of XTC MP3s and stuff onto my MP3 player, and when I heard loads of people talk about them in relation to Blur online, I like, you know, hearing like Respectable Street, I'm just like, wow, Blur just rips that song off with Tracy Jacks. It's exactly the same song.
I used to be on the Blur forum because they were my favourite band, and that was probably quite a big point for me getting into XTC because the Andy's Modern Life sessions I kind of knew those really well, and then Respectable Street being credited as like an inspiration for certain songs on, for instance, The Great Escape or whatever. I sort of, that's probably how I first learned about a lot of their discography before I actually heard it. So, but yeah, Blur, the Blur into XTC gateway is definitely a thing, I think.
Yeah, a lot of older fans who got into them like when they were originally together, like find that pipeline of mine really funny for some reason. But I feel like more Blur / like Damon Albarn fans need to go back and listen to XTC. And like through XTC, I obviously got into like the Kinks, so that's like there's like a whole family tree chronology. And then I don't know, there's loads of bands that can fit in as like the like great grandchild following Blur. I'm not sure. We have to see what history decides is like the next step. It could be like bands like Feet or Sports Team or any of those that sort of fit in that clever British observational style of songwriting.
Yeah, I've seen the Blur to XTC pipeline, also the Pulp to XTC pipeline, I think.
In retrospect,
I think Blur and Pulp are kind of similar.
I grew up like Blur was like my first love, but in like over time I've realised Pulp were like the better Britpop acts. Hot take, I don't know, but
I love Pulp, but I'm Blur.
Yeah, fair enough.
Or Suede even.
They're all great.
They're all great, yeah.
What about you, Lexie? What was your XTC gateway moment?
It's very similar to yours, which is probably no surprise because you and I met because we're Oingo Boingo fans. But I follow Danny Elfman on Twitter, and he's very good about replying to fans. Someone asked him what his biggest inspirations were for Only a Lad and their first EP. And I remember he listed a few acts. He said, I don't know if he said XTC, but he said specifically Andy Partridge. And I was like, wonder who that is. Sounds like Alan Partridge. And then he also listed Sparks and the Selector and maybe one other one. But that led me to dig into XTC, and I realized, oh, this is the band that does Nigel. Okay. The song that I was lukewarm about, and then suddenly I listened to Drums and Wires in its entirety, and I kind of understood the song. I don't think I would have understood it just out of context, like on the radio, or, you know, it comes up on my Spotify. I didn't get it, but now I think it's an amazing song. Other than Drums and Wires, Black Sea, I think, is the next one that I went with. The album cover really drew me to that one. I think that one fluctuates as my favorite, probably between that one and, this is kind of a hot take, but Mummer. I really love Mummer. I know it's kind of a polarizing album for some, but yeah. I also, the song I'm Bugged and Statue of Liberty, for some reason, were there really early on in my XTC fan genesis, and I'm Bugged just kind of blew my mind. I was like, wow, Boingo Boingo really just ripped off this.
I was literally just about to say I'm Bugged is a sister song to Insect.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, they're the perfect duo.
I discovered Oingo Boingo through XTC, so I went the other route because I like
Nice.
obviously I didn't come from the new wave roots. I was just like the indie Britpop roots, and then since then I've got into like Sparks, They Might Be Giants, Oingo Boingo, and like there's probably still loads I need to branch off from
Yeah.
that tree, I suppose. Yeah.
There's always more.
Yeah, Sparks is another one that Lexie and I are big fans of. We actually saw them in March, I think it was, in Minneapolis. But yeah, they're amazing and they're still touring, which is crazy.
And they're still doing some of their most innovative and exciting music, like in their 70s. Like their male brothers are so talented.
Yeah, it's amazing. And their latest album was actually really great too.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of just going off of what was said in the last Young Takeover episode, I know a lot of you guys are artists as well as musicians, and do you think that XTC has had any influence on your art? And if it has, what is that influence? And also, why do you think so many creative and artistically driven people are drawn to the band?
Well, I'm an animator slash filmmaker, and XTC have directly and explicitly probably the reason why I made the film that I've recently finished and is circulating festivals and having screenings. So it recently screened at the XTC convention. I don't know if either of you managed to catch it, but I made a short animated documentary about Martin Yule, and he has been a figure that's been in my life for as long as I remember, because my dad ran his website in the early 2000s. And so even then, like growing up, I listened to Martin Yule's like he'd make these audiobooks for his daughter called Brian the Lion, and they're the only thing he doesn't publicize or commercialize. And so my first introduction to him was through that. So obviously I've heard his music and stuff growing up, and then when I was getting into XTC later, I was like, hang on, Andy produced the Greatest Living Englishman album, which I definitely heard loads of, but knowing that connection, something I was like really getting into, like kind of made me fully get it and like get my dad's like appreciation for him. So it was like, yeah, I already had that personal connection, but it was getting into XTC that got me back into and probably like even with XTC it's like a similar situation, because I'd heard the songs growing up and everything, but it wasn't like mine yet. And at that point, after hearing The Greatest Living Englishman as an adult, it was like, this is mine. And I got really into his music, and I was making my second year film, and I was like, whoa, Martin Yule was like a connection that I have to my dad. I can actually reach out to him, and I did, and I got to make a film and interview him in his house. And I made it look like his early cassette tapes, in terms of the sort of sketchy illustrations that we'd have on the front, because Martin Yule is one of the pioneers of home recording. So these tapes are just like scrappily recorded. It's like if XTC had zero production and was just made in a kitchen, is how I describe his music. So like anyone who hasn't listened to his music yet, it like definitely do, and start with The Greatest Living Englishman and work your way around from there. You can ask me for recommendations. I'm always happy to talk about Martin Yule or XTC. So yeah, I got to make this film, which was the best like final year project I could have ever dreamed of, because I ended up discovering the right bands at the right time.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
I wish that I got the chance to see that.
Yeah,
Me and Ashley missed a bit of the convention because of the time schedule change, and we were looking at the old itinerary. But dang, that would have been really awesome. You know, I actually haven't listened to Martin Newell, but I will now. He was recommended to me on Facebook as a friend, but now I know that he's an artist, and I'll definitely look into him.
I just want to applaud Lewis's film. It was excellent. It was really
yeah,
good.
I've seen I saw like a couple of clips or screenshots that you posted from your film, and I'd definitely be really interested in seeing it. If you ever screen it again, I would love to go. That's a really cool story, and I haven't gotten into Martin Newell either, but it makes me want to, hearing about that. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've been really into graphic design and art for a while, which funnily enough, that's not what I'm getting my master's in, but it kind of eventually spilled into some other things too. I know some of you might know I've been helping run a revived Oingo Boingo fanzine that we put together and ship out to people. So it's been kind of cool to bring back the idea of fanzines from the 70s and 80s. I know Lexie and I were talking a little bit about maybe doing something for XTC. Not sure, but yeah, I also knitted that drums and wires sweater to take to the convention. It's funny that it ended up getting like noticed on Twitter. It was just crazy to see people who I had no idea like listened to them or liked them at all and reached out and were like, "Oh, I love XTC. This is so cool." And I was like, "That's I had no idea." And it's I think it's kind of a testament to the fact that they're still prevalent and alive amongst a newer generation of fans. But I think for me, I always gravitate towards drawing things that inspire me or taking and incorporating elements of things that I'm really drawn to. And there's actually a lot of great artwork in and around XTC, I think. I always cite the Drums and Wires album cover as being one of my, if not my all-time favorite piece of graphic design, simply because I think everything about it just works so well and really kind of solidified a logo for them as a band. And it's very simple, but somehow it's super eye-catching and powerful. And yeah, I love it. It's really great. I love the colors. And I think that my own artwork kind of uses that idea of minimalism, but also adding like color and shape. And I think that I kind of subliminally picked that up from some of the XTC artwork. I also love the Oranges and Lemons album cover, which I know is inspired by the Beatles and the Peter Max artwork and Yellow Submarine and all of that. But I love the way that it turned out. I think it's really cool. And another one that I really love is the compact singles disc with that little Harlequin clown on it. I absolutely love that one. And, also seeing Andy's art background, I know he talks a little bit about his synesthesia, which I find really interesting. I think sometimes my thought process can be somewhat similar in that I kind of just see something and it inspires me and I just envision like a whole finished piece in my head to work from, kind of like a roadmap of sorts. And hearing about how his synesthesia influences his songwriting is really cool, as well as, I think the world building that is tied into the songs, especially with albums like, Big Express, Skylarking, even some of the Duke's stuff. And I think that that really attracts a lot of artistic people and creative people. And because I think that something about XTC that's just always done so well is the songs paint really vivid images in your head. So I would say that's probably why there's so many creative fans, and it's been so cool to see all of the things that people make. I've seen XTC clothing. I know there's someone on Twitter who makes clothing inspired by them, as well as I think Cooper was at the convention who did that really cool punch rug, drums and wires back patch. So that was super fun to see as well.
I'm so glad that you brought up synesthesia. I'm just dying to talk about it. I don't consider myself an artist. I feel like a wannabe artist that's dying to find their medium, and hopefully I will someday. But I feel like I find Andy's songwriting approach to be very relatable, and I have a lot of different types of synesthesia connections that are just kind of inherent in my thought processes, and I respect that, and I think it's a very inspiring mode of songwriting, and I just think that it sort of, like you said, creates very vivid images. I think part of the reason why Mummer is one of my favorite XTC records is because it is kind of like everything else was in black and white, and for the first time, there's all this color. And I can see that in the songwriting. I can see how suddenly the new studio techniques and just the possibilities that were unleashed with Mummer just kind of really ring true with the songwriting, and it just feels so vivid and colorful and powerful. I just love it very much. And
How you described Oranges and Lemons to me at the convention has made me love the album more, so please talk about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so with Oranges and Lemons, I don't know why, but I always, when I hear it, I picture, I don't know how to describe it, but coloured piped glass. So I picture like the old Windows XP pipes screensaver. I picture like coloured glass, like different, like in sort of different sections, different colours. And I always picture it as if the album's being played on that. And I don't really know how to describe that, but that's just the evocation I get when I hear it. Yeah, it's a strange one. But actually, I mean, you mentioned graphic design and that. Like when I did graphic design at college, and a big thing was for me was album covers, and Drums and Wires was one of my favorite. Well, it is one of my favorite album covers, and I remember using that as an inspiration for just little things, little logos and stuff, because that's maybe a top 10 album cover for me, along with English Settlement, because I love the horse. But I like minimal artwork, but with color. So I mean, I think Lexie, you mentioned Black Sea. I didn't hear Black Sea as one of the first Lexie albums I heard. I left it a while because I didn't like the album cover as much as some of the other ones. It's a great picture of the band, but I just like band covers less. Whereas Big Express with the wheel, or Non-Such, with the cast, I just like 2 or 3 colors for tonal. And I guess when I hear the albums, I sort of picture, I don't know how to describe it, but I guess it's has synergy to synesthesia. Uh, like, so it's a line drawing on Non-Such. I hear line drawings when I hear the album, that kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, I get like strange evocations when I hear certain songs or certain bits in certain songs, that kind of thing.
their music definitely has the tendency to do that. I think that I understand why Oranges and Lemons kind of evokes that image in your mind. I think it makes sense. It's a very bright and colorful album as well. Maybe even more so than Mummer.
Yeah.
One of my favorite songs by them is on that record, Cross This Ant Heap.
Oh, lovely song.
Yes.
My favorite is Poor Skeleton, I think. I just love it.
That's another very Oingo Boingo style song, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I have like a really embarrassing confession. Like when I read Across This Ant Heap for the first time, I thought it said antheap, and I didn't know what an antheap was, and I just thought it was like a British thing, and I was like, oh, and then I was like, wait, actually, I think I'm kind of an idiot.
I have to admit, I thought the
No.
same thing. I read antheap until I heard the song, and I was like, oh, is this a word that Andy Partridge made up? Is ant heap a word?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've never heard.
ant heap. It's like, have you ever played miniature golf with the little like ant heaps that you have to like put the ball into?
I mean, I guess I've always called them ant hills.
Molehill,
But-
anthill. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's one of those things. Yeah, can go either way.
But yeah, I know another question I had for you guys was I know a lot of you guys are music buffs, and just kind of assuming everybody collects vinyl records, but even if you don't, I think there are a lot of really cool XTC vinyls that are floating around out there. And if you do have any, what is your favorite XTC vinyl in your collection, and what is one that you would love to have?
And mine is definitely my Senses Working Overtime 45 UK pressing. I just love the packaging. I think the gatefold with all the images is just it's really cool. I've never seen a single package like that before.
Oh, lovely. I'm more of a CD. I like CDs more, and what I like about my
Yeah.
vinyl, it's stuff I kind of chance upon secondhand. But so I'm not sure what my ideal vinyl would be. But my favorite XTC CD I have is the mini disc of the Loving, which I got at the convention, and it has it's in like a little plastic pouch that as if taken from a shop. I don't know what you call those little where you hang stuff. It's got like a hanger thing on it. I quite like that.
Yeah, I know.
I also only really have a CD collection, but I only have 2 XTC CDs. One that I stumbled across in the wild, which was the Fossil Fuels Best Of, and None Such, which my dad gave me, but I don't have much of a physical collection currently.
I had to build mine gradually, because when I got into XTC properly in the early 2010s, my good CD player broke in about 2011, and that sealed my CD collection off for a while, in a sense. So I kind of started listening to stuff more online. Until then, I was entirely CDs and never really went online for music. So they're one of my, I guess in a way, they're one of my first digital bands, and I've gradually pieced together their discography on CD. But it's a bit uneven. Some of them are the 2001 version, some of the 8 records reissues. So the spines look a bit weird on a shelf if you try and line them up. Because it's a bit ugly, because some of them are just plain white and some of them are coloured. But there we are. It's a bit like the Bowie 99 remasters are a bit uneven there as well.
Yeah, I really like. I'm starting to get into the CDs, but I bought a CD player when Andy and Colin's new music came out, because I didn't have any way of listening to it and I couldn't play it in my car, so I bought a CD player for Hardest Battle actually. But so now I'm starting to collect more CDs. But I think that vinyl wise, for me, my favorite is probably the Sergeant Rock 45, the UK pressing, because it has that. I think Andy drew it. Looks like something Andy would draw, but it's the comic strip of Sergeant Rock that is like, it's like a fold out.
Yeah.
I have it hung up on my wall.
I adore the artwork for Sergeant Rock, because the influence for those art is definitely Corporal Clop from the Dandy comic, which is like a UK children's comic, and like one of my like strongest and most passionate interests growing up is like that particular scene of humour children's comics. And like I'm pretty sure Andy had a bunch of Beanos and Dandy comics lying around the studio during the Drums and Wires sessions, from what I gather. If I'm remembering correctly, he wanted Nash the dog, which is like one of the main characters, to be the central image on the Drums and Wires originally. But obviously DC Thompson, who published those comics, are like really strict with copyright, so that never happened. But let's be glad we got the Drums and Wires album cover instead of that. But like, yeah, I don't know, maybe that is like this weird pipeline that somehow the like energy of these children's comics was like, because like Andy loved comics, like whether that be like American superhero comics and those, but maybe like my love for comics somehow made me resonate with XTC because of that shared like influence creatively.
I love that picture of Andy with the comic in the studio about 10 years later.
Yeah.
That used to be on Wikipedia. I don't think it's there anymore, but that was a good photo.
I think I read on the Facebook group, or some Facebook group, that it wasn't Andy that drew the artwork, but somebody else. But maybe we'll have to have somebody debunk that. I'm not sure. It definitely looks like his art style.
Oh, for the Sergeant Rock?
Yeah, it definitely looks like his kind of his style, though.
Look up Corporal Clop when later though, because like you will see the way the character is drawn, it's like directly like mirroring that. It's like a direct parody of that character.
All right, I'll definitely do that.
But when you were talking about creatives and I guess the way XTC fits into that, because I like writing about music, but I've only really done it if I have an inspiration to write. So for me, it was like I mean I have a few blogs and stuff, but I don't really touch them that often. But one day I was like, I'm going to do a review of the Big Express, and I wrote about 4,000 words. But in writing it was how I kind of how can I put it? Trying to put these evocations into prose, but also when I was writing it, I was thinking more about what things reminded me of. So certain songs, I was getting maybe kind of strange connections. But I guess this ties into the idea of pipelines, because I hear a certain song on the Big Express, and I'm trying to compare it to several different things at once that maybe don't have much in common. But I really enjoy doing that, and XTC are probably more than a lot of people I've written about the bands where I can kind of plot continuums or whatever. So I did a piece once on Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch, the 60s pop group. They're from Salisbury, so they're also from Wiltshire. And I was thinking about their influence, whether that's a genuine influence or not, but just a continuum. And they had number one in the late 60s, The Legend of Xanadu, which has a kind of spaghetti western feel, and it has like a horse whip.
Oh, I love that.
It's a great song. But then
Yeah.
first time I heard Shake Your Donkey Up, I thought, well, it's a bit like that. And I'm just, I like the idea of a kind of a constellation where you can connect, things together. I really, that's like, maybe that's the way my mind works. I just like to fit pieces in kind of odd ways, and XTC allow me to do that pretty heavily. They're very much, they get my creative juices flowing, that's for sure.
We've talked about it before, but like the idea of XTC are like this central planet. Like I see people probably treat the Beatles like that as well. Where it's like they're the band that like everyone else orbits. It's like I'll discover XTC and then boom, Martin Yule, like Robin Hitchcock, like Oingo Boingo, Sparks by Moby Jones. Like it all just sort of builds this like constellation, and you sort of travel between them, and you find they influenced this or they collaborated with X, and you build this whole system. Like XTC are like my central planet in that scene.
Yeah, I definitely see it as a constellation. That's the word I use. I just think pop is a constellation, and bands and artists, they're interdependent, so their own thing, but they connect. They all connect, even if they don't know they do, even if it's in unobvious ways. I just like to draw the lines,
I'm always hearing current bands.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even hear it in some current bands. One band that I really like is The Last Shadow Puppets, and I think that their first album sounds a lot like Dukes of Stratosphere, and I've always thought that. And then Miles Kane was in the documentary, so I was like, okay, now I know for sure that he had to have been inspired by it somehow.
On the subject of the Dukes, it's because Andy credited Nick Nicely, Hilly Fields as an inspiration on 25 o'clock that I think me and Hugh as well. Maybe I'm not sure about Hugh, but I definitely discovered Nick Nicely initially through that, I believe, and I love that. That's like maybe my favorite, one of my 10 favorite songs of all time, Hilly Fields. So that's directly, I think, because of Andy's sort of championing of it once upon a time. In an obscure interview or whatever it was. So yeah, it can be sometimes the oddest places that you'll find what really connects.
Yeah, definitely.
I hear XTC's influence so much in current music, like even in completely different genres. Like I'm of the belief, this might be a bold statement, I feel like XTC are part of a lineage of what led to like current scenes, like even like the hyperpop scene now.
I kind of get that.
Like especially with like the later sound with 100 Gex, it sounds like contemporary white music and go to, and I am not mad for that. Like you listen to the stuff they're putting out now, there is a direct lineage to that.
That is so interesting.
I totally feel that, and I feel like tracks like Crosswires, and I think like there is a you can plot that line, you can put Max Tundra on it, or you can kind of you can fit the places, So I definitely get what you're saying.
Like Max Tundra is influenced by Cardiacs, and Cardiacs are influenced by XTC. So like canonically, XTC did lead to hyperpop because Max Tundra influenced A.G. Cook, who was the godfather of that whole scene. So yeah, it's not even.
I put Cardiacs, they're from London, but because a lot of their later stuff, the later operations and the business conventions in Salisbury, I put them on the Moonraker art pop lineage in my head. So it's pretty much Cardiacs by proxy, XTC, Dave D. Dozy Titch, Brian Prothero, who he moved to London, but he did some really eccentric albums in the 70s that I love. And I like because I'm from Wiltshire, I guess I'm a bit biased, but I like to think of all Swindon in the north, Salisbury in the south. They're kind of anchored. Then there's me in the county town, Trowbridge. There's no one famous here, but yeah, I quite like to think about it that way.
I think that would be a really interesting essay, how XTC indirectly led to hyperpop.
Yeah, I agree.
I will do
Yeah.
Now that you bring it up, because I've honestly never thought of that.
Like
Crosswires.
Very dissonant early stuff.
Definitely Crosswires.
Listen to the latest 100 Gex song, Doritos and Fritos. It sounds like modern production on like a white music song. It is crazy.
What I also find is certain XTC songs will have the weirdest glimpses of the future. So the end of Living Through Another Cuba, it sounds like Aphex Twin record playing underwater or something. It's just where's that come from?
Yeah.
Or the breakdown in the middle of Donkey Up again. It's like if we're going to keep it to Swindon, Meat Manifesto, who are sort of a post-industrial group who formed later in the 80s. I don't know. I could just draw a line between that the middle of Shake Your Donkey Up into them. it can be kind of the weirdest. It's to XTC's genius, if you will, that sometimes the oddest little bits will remind you of just completely disparate, seemingly unconnected artists or whatever, or scenes or dramas or whatever.
Yeah, I noticed that same thing too. Like in the part in Melt the Guns that slows down, I'm speaking to the Justice League. That part always reminds me of something that you'd hear on like Demon Days or a Gorillaz record. It feels like a flash forward to the future. And I know there are other moments too where I've thought that about other contemporary bands.
I see that with Melt the Guns, and the end of that song with Ticking goes back. That's 10cc Clockwork Creep. That's what that reminds me of. So then you can draw a path between 10cc and XTC. Well, they rhyme, so that's another. Didn't realise it until I said it aloud, but yeah.
A lot of their sound in like Animal Collective as well, like it's nearly
Yes.
Africa, like tracks like that.
Yeah,
Like that. It's nearly Africa could be a Sung Tongs track. It sounds
that's
exactly like that album.
that's a really apt comparison.
The first time I heard it's nearly Africa, I was like, I've not really heard. I don't really know what this sounds like, if anything. It completely kind of threw me a bit the first time I heard it. There's only another song that did that was Travels in Nylon or Neolon, or however you want to say it. That was like, it's close to metal. I know people have said that, but it reminds me more of like the Creatures, Susie C. It kind of reminded me of that, even though I don't know, but just certain things, certain drum beats, certain drum patterns, or whatever, will just completely put me in a different place, I suppose. Not necessarily the Creatures are a completely different place, but you see what I mean. It can be kind
Yeah.
of odd stretches you make in your head.
Another one I noticed is in Hold Me My Daddy, that little guitar ditty. I can't exactly pinpoint what point in the song it is, but it reminds me of something that you'd hear on a Mac DeMarco record, and every time I hear it, I can't distinguish it from that anymore.
I mean, Mac DeMarco comes from the Martin Yule lineage, because Mac DeMarco is like he worships Martin Yule, and Martin Yule is part of it. Like, Andy Partridge produced his albums and was influenced by XTC, so there is a direct lineage to him.
There's that family tree again. It's really interesting.
So that's what I say. I like the word interdependent, as I think I said.
Yeah.
They're all own things, but they connect. They just totally connect. I love it.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting writing piece, I think, just how they connect, like how it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
Be really cool to hear about. But yeah, I think, since this is kind of a festive episode and the holidays are coming up and everything, it's been super exciting to listen to Andy's new EP, My Failed Christmas Career, that came out. I really liked the last track, Unwrap You at Christmas.
Oh, is that the one that's sung
by Holly, right?
Yeah, Holly,
Yeah, sung by Holly. Yeah, she does a really good job. I'm somebody that likes to get into the Christmas spirit really early, probably earlier than I should, but I think that they all kind of have that classic like Christmas music sound to them. I know I've kind of always really enjoyed. I know Andy did a track with XTC. I think it was under the name Three Wise Men called "Thanks for Christmas." I don't know if you guys have ever heard that one, but I really like that one as well.
Mine just arrived in the mail. I haven't had the chance to listen yet, although someone did upload Unwrap You at Christmas to YouTube, and I listened to that. Holly's got a lovely voice. On the topic of Unwrap You at Christmas, it was like a late era's Monkees song.
I kind of prefer the version on this EP.
It was when they were kind of getting up there in their years, right? I think it's kind of funny for like these old men that aren't really teeny boppers anymore to have such a provocative song as a single. I think it's really funny.
There was a bit on one of the They Might Be Giants podcasts where one of the hosts was talking about seeing the Monkees as a kid and being traumatized because he saw them as old men and he was envisioning them as a young band, and I always think of that as so funny.
It reminds me of that Victoria's Secret ad that Bob Dylan was in when he was like in his 50s or even 60s maybe, and it's kind of wrong.
I think Andy's really retained his sound though, like over the years. I was listening to My Failed Songwriting Career songs and I was like, he sounds the exact same. Like, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a difference from maybe like white music era to now, but
the seal barking era.
He, to me, has really retained
Can we talk about the evolution of Andy's voice? Because Andy
Ah.
did the bark to sort of have his own identity, because he wanted to have like a unique selling point of his voice. And then gradually throughout the discography, you hear him discover his voice, and that's one of my favourite things about
Yes.
binging their discography. Is it's like by the end, this is how Andy Partridge sings. And
Right.
it's beautiful.
To
Yeah.
go
That's
from
exactly how I feel.
I'm bugged with the the various barking and squeaking and stuff like that to go to wrapped in gray. It's really just the evolution is it's really endearing because I feel maybe anybody can find their voice if they dedicate themselves to it. He's always been a
Yeah.
great singer. That's not to discount that, but
I think that that's kind of true throughout the whole band too. Like I think the same with Colin, like, going from Crossfires to a song like Bungalow.
Bungalow.
yeah, when he found his own voice.
It's crazy how
The early records, they really sound very similar. I know that it was sort of like trying to go for, the sound, a single sound, but I think that my favorite Colin songs are where he finds his voice and has such distinctive songwriting. I love his melodies.
I feel like with Colin, there was a shift in the mid '80s where I don't want to say sentimental, but the songs became generally more about childhood or memories or whatever, or just upbringing. And that's, as you say, I think that's a lot of my favorite songs of his are after that, because a lot of his earlier songs, I guess, are more sort of social comment. Maybe I feel the change. Maybe I mean it's obviously roughly speaking, but the change maybe is the Big Express, which starts with "Wake Up," which is the Colin of Ball and Chain and so on, and then I Remember the Sun, which is the Colin of Bungalow, Frivolous Tonight, and yeah, that's why I feel.
I'll often binge their discography over a day and just get to the end and be like, how did they get here? Because there seems to be like a natural sort of flow from the start to finish, but start to finish is so different. I get all their albums feel like XTC. None of them feel like an identity crisis. They all feel like that sound, but completely different bands, but still very much the same band in spirit. It's crazy.
It's a seamless gradient
Yeah.
across their discography.
Yeah, that's what makes them so special to me. I think just compared to a lot of the other bands, to me, there's usually one or two albums that I'm like, this one wasn't quite, my favorite, or, I don't quite know what they were going for here. But I think with XTC, all of the albums have their own purpose, and they're great in their own right and kind of serve that purpose in the evolution of the band. And I think, to me, that's what really makes them stand out.
They're
remarkable for a 12 album band, or 14 if you include the Dukes, and there's no padding. It's a beautifully realized discography.
I was like, we all love Sparks, and they definitely have loads of albums. They're trying new things, and I love that. But I would never go back to listening to Balls again. Personally.
I quite like Balls. I quite like their dancier stuff.
Yeah. I think XTC is the only band I love where every single one of their records could be a desert island album for me. Wouldn't matter what it was. I could take it with me.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
Could be the one thing I'd listen to forever.
I know.
There are very few bands I like who have over 10 albums where every one of them is great. Like Super Furry Animals are another one, I'd say. But I think that they have over 10. They have a lot anyway. But and just every album is, oh yeah, I love this album,
Yeah.
Sometimes if it's one I've forgotten, I love until I hear it. So I don't listen to Wasp Star that much. Contrary to Apple Venus being my favorite and a bit odd, but when I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a brilliant album.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I moved here, I was trying to kind of decide what vinyls to bring, and because I have I think I have all of the albums now, and I was like, well, I have to just pick my favorites, and then I couldn't pick which. I just had to bring all of them, and then just carry around a heavier suitcase in the airport. But I think it was worth it.
Definitely.
So to kind of wrap up the podcast here, in their songs, XTC sometimes uses unusual instruments and noises, and I think most of us being music fans are usually able to guess what they are. I know all of us kind of brought something that makes a weird or unusual noise, and I think it would be fun to play a little game called What Do You Call That Noise? Conveniently named after the podcast. And basically the premise is pretty simple. We just make the noise and guess what it's coming from. So I guess I can go first here. I don't know if the sound will pick up very well, but I don't know if you guys can guess what that is.
Is that either like glass bottles?
Is it a toy xylophone?
Yeah, I was thinking xylophone.
Nice.
That's what I was trying to go for, but yeah, they are. I did the thing where you pour the water at different heights in the bottles, and then it like makes a different noise each one. So, but yes, I was trying to go for xylophone.
It's the glass bottles of oranges and lemons.
Yeah, full circle. Mine is quite distinctive, but I'll do mine. You guys might be able to guess right away. I wanted to do something a little more obscure, but I couldn't find anything around the house.
Is that like a frying pan?
You're hitting like a pan?
Is it the back of a metal box or something?
Yeah.
Is it a plate?
It is not. It is it's an instrument. Arguably.
Oh.
Is
it
it
like
a
a
cowbell?
cowbell?
It is a cowbell.
Cowbell.
Yes.
Lovely. So I can do mine. I also struggled a little bit to find something. So I'm not sure how inventive or creative this is, and it's probably really easy if you can hear it. But
A lighter?
Is that a lighter?
no,
So, yeah, lighter.
it's not. It's not a lighter.
Do it again.
If you can hear my dog, I'm sorry.
That's a dog.
I'll do it again.
Yeah,
Sorry.
dog.
It's not the dog.
What do you call that noise?
You call that Bella. That's her name.
Scissors.
Scissors.
Snipping goes the scissor man. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
I couldn't think of anything, so just scissors.
clever.
Mine is also not going to be hard, probably.
Vacuum.
A dustbuster?
Handhold vacuum, like a handhold one.
No. No.
Blender?
Is it a blender?
No. I thought this would be easier.
Oh, man. If it's not vacuum, I'm out of guesses.
Wait, do it again.
I think you'll kick yourself when I tell you.
That just sounds like my handhold mic.
Yeah.
Vacuum. I can't get
Yeah.
that out of my head.
Is it a power drill?
No. I'm not playing with you. You'll kick yourself when I tell you.
A hair dryer?
It's a hairdryer.
Is it a hair dryer?
Oh, man.
Nice.
Hair dryer.
It is a hairdryer.
This game is harder than we thought it
I
would be.
know.
I thought everybody would get my cowbell. Maybe I'm just not good at playing it.
All right. Well, I think this was a good end to the episode, and I'm so glad that I got to talk to you guys today and find out a little bit more about how everybody got into XTC and also what drew us to them as a band. But yeah, it's been lovely talking with you guys.
Thank
It's
you.
been lovely. Yeah, it's been lovely being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Young Generation Takeover was fun.
What do you call that noise?
Brilliant work, Ashley. Thanks so much for hosting such a tremendous discussion. And thanks, of course, to Lexie, Lee, and Lewis for keeping the party going. Happy Christmas, everybody. And thank you once again to everyone who has supported the podcast on Patreon, who you can join at patreon.com/Mark Fisher. Thanks in particular to the following Knights in Shining Karma: Terry Arnott, Kevin Burt, Lorenzo Chachi, Cale Corbett, Liam Duggan, Jamie Dunn, Jeff Farris, Leslie Gooch, Robert Graham, Alan Hughes, Marek Kraus, Jesper Kumberg, Robert Lawlaw, Dennis LaCourier, Liz Lynch, Murray Meikle, Yusef Mora, Karen Neal, Amy Parkinson, Mark Reed, James Reimer, Simon Slato, Michael Sutcliffe, Mark Thomas, Nigel Waller, and Martin Whitley. Great to have you all on board. I'll be back next month with more fun and games. See you then.